The plane doors closed with a soft thud, and the young woman took a deep breath. Her hands trembled as she clutched her small handbag tightly against her chest. It was her first flight ever, and her heart beat as if she was about to face an exam she had never studied for. Her name was Aisha. She came from a small town, a place where people spoke more about farming and market prices than airports or planes. Now, here she was, dressed in her best, an old but neat dress, boarding a flight full of people who looked confident, polished and rich. She looked at the seat number on her ticket, 21A. She walked down the aisle slowly, eyes darting from row to row, trying to match the numbers. But her nerves got the better of her. After passing several rows, she stopped at 12A instead of 21A. The numbers blurred in her eyes, and she sat down quickly, wanting to hide before someone noticed her nervousness. Aisha pressed her face against the small oval window, marveling at the giant wing outside. "So this is how people fly above the clouds," she whispered to herself, a small smile on her lips. But her peace didn't last long. A few minutes later, the sound of footsteps approached. A tall man in a dark suit stopped beside her. His presence was heavy, commanding, like he was used to being obeyed. He glanced at his boarding pass, then at her. "You're in my seat," he said firmly. Aisha's heart jumped. She looked up and saw his sharp eyes, the kind of eyes that never took no for an answer. His suit was perfectly tailored, his watch shone under the cabin lights, and his voice had the weight of authority. I think this is mine," she stammered, holding up her ticket. He leaned slightly closer, his expression unreadable. "This is 12A. Your ticket says 21A. Her cheeks burned red as other passengers turned to look. A soft murmur spread through the cabin. Aisha quickly stood up, fumbling with her bag, embarrassed beyond words. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean." But before she could move away, the flight attendant stepped forward. She glanced at the man's ticket, then at Aisha's. Her polite smile carried a trace of awkwardness. "Miss, your seat is a few rows back. Please, let's move you." The man sighed in irritation, but something in his eyes lingered on her. For a moment, it wasn't annoyance, it was curiosity. Aisha hurried down the aisle, eyes fixed on the floor, wishing she could vanish. She found her actual seat, far from the man, and sank into it. Her chest was tight with humiliation. What a terrible start, she thought, closing her eyes. But destiny wasn't finished with her. The plane took off, climbing into the sky. The ride was smooth at first, but soon turbulence shook the cabin. Passengers gripped their armrests, and Aisha panicked. Her hand shot out instinctively, clutching the nearest armrest, only it wasn't an armrest. It was someone's hand. She gasped and turned. Sitting right beside her, in the seat across the aisle, was the same man. The same sharp eyes, the same tailored suit. He raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "You again," he muttered. Aisha snatched her hand back, mortified. "I am sorry. I didn't mean." The turbulence grew worse, the plane rattling, and her fear betrayed her. Once again, she clutched his hand tightly, eyes squeezed shut. Passengers chuckled quietly at the sight, but the man did not pull away this time. He simply looked at her, his face unreadable, while her small hand clung to his. When the shaking finally stopped, Aisha let go and buried her face in her hands. Her shame felt unbearable. Twice now, she had embarrassed herself before this stranger. She whispered, "This is the worst day of my life." But the man's gaze softened ever so slightly. He leaned closer and spoke low enough for only her to hear. "First flights are scary. Don't worry, you'll survive." Aisha looked at him, shocked by his unexpected kindness. His eyes were still stern, but there was something else hidden in them, something she couldn't name yet. She didn't know that this man wasn't just any passenger. He was the CEO of a powerful company, someone newspapers wrote about and people admired from a distance. And she didn't know that this wrong seat, this wrong start, was about to write the first line of a story neither of them had planned. The plane had reached cruising altitude, and the hum of the engines filled the cabin. Aisha tried to calm her racing heart, still flushed from the embarrassment of sitting in the wrong seat. She thought the ordeal was over, but fate had other plans. A sudden bump jolted the plane. Aisha gripped her armrests tightly, eyes wide with fear. Around her, passengers held on to anything they could find, and the cabin crew called out soothing instructions. Her breath came in short, quick gasps. In a panic, she reached for the nearest hand to steady herself. But her hand landed on someone else's, again. She looked up, expecting irritation or anger, but instead she saw him. The CEO from her wrong seat incident. His dark eyes studied her silently, unblinking. I am sorry, she stammered, letting go immediately. Her cheeks burned red. He didn't speak. Instead, he raised a single eyebrow and crossed his arms. There was no smile, no trace of amusement. Just a steady, commanding stare that made her feel small and nervous all at once. Aisha whispered to herself, "Why me? Why is he here?" The turbulence continued, shaking the plane. Aisha's fear rose with every bump, and before she knew it, her hand shot out again, gripping his arm instinctively. He looked down at her, his expression unreadable. "You're panicking," he said quietly, almost as if he were scolding a child. I don't fly often," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I've never done this before." He leaned back in his seat, letting out a controlled sigh. "Clearly. But clinging to me won't help." Aisha froze. His words were sharp, almost cold, but beneath that, she sensed a strange curiosity. He wasn't angry at her. He wasn't trying to humiliate her. And yet, there was an unspoken challenge in his gaze. You don't have to talk to me like that," she said, trying to sound brave but failing. "Why not?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. "I don't tolerate panic, and I certainly don't tolerate excuses. Life doesn't wait for anyone." Aisha's heart skipped a beat. His words sounded harsh, but they carried weight. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, but something in his tone made her pause. For the next few minutes, silence fell between them. The turbulence subsided, but her mind was still racing. She couldn't stop thinking about him. Who was he? Why did he seem so intimidating, yet strangely human at the same time? Suddenly, the man leaned slightly forward. "Tell me something," he said. "Why did you sit in my seat earlier?" Aisha's cheeks burned again. She looked away, fumbling with her bag. I was nervous. I didn't check the number properly. I'm sorry." He didn't smile. "Excuses," he muttered, almost to himself. Then, after a pause, he added, "Most people in my position would have yelled at you. Most people would have made you feel small. But you didn't cry or beg. You argued back." Aisha blinked. "I argued back. I barely remember what I said." He studied her carefully, his dark eyes sharp. "That's what I remember. And it matters." Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't understand why it mattered to him, or why she felt a strange mix of fear and curiosity in his presence. The flight continued smoothly, but the tension between them remained. Passengers nearby whispered softly, some stealing glances, noticing the unusual dynamic. The CEO's presence was intimidating, yet there was something about the way he watched her that made everyone else feel the weight of his authority. Hours passed, and the plane began its descent. Aisha's mind was full of questions. Why was he so attentive? Why did he care about a simple wrong seat incident? When the plane finally landed, the CEO gathered his belongings, his movements precise and confident. He walked past her without a word, but before he disappeared into the crowd, he turned slightly and gave her a look. A look that said, "I haven't forgotten you." Aisha's hands trembled. Her first flight had been a disaster in many ways, but it had also been the beginning of something she could not yet understand. Something that felt bigger than embarrassment, bigger than fear, something that could change her life forever. And as she stepped out into the busy airport, she couldn't shake the thought, This man, this stranger, would not be leaving her life anytime soon. Aisha stepped out of the airport into the bright sunlight, trying to shake off the nerves from her first flight. She told herself it was over, that she would never see the CEO again. But fate had its own plans. Later that week, she arrived at a corporate building for what she thought would be a simple job interview. She had prepared her resume, rehearsed answers, and hoped to impress the interviewers with her honesty and hard work. The building was tall and imposing, with glass walls reflecting the sky. She felt small as she walked through the lobby, clutching her bag tightly. Employees in suits passed her by, some glancing at her curiously. Aisha took a deep breath and reminded herself, "Focus. You've worked hard for this. Just be yourself." She was escorted into the interview room. As she entered, her eyes widened in shock. Sitting at the head of the table, reviewing papers, was him, the CEO from the plane. For a moment, the world froze around her. The man who had made her first flight so unforgettable was now here, in her interview. She wanted to turn and run, but she knew she couldn't. He looked up, and their eyes met. A slow, knowing smile curved on his lips. Aisha's stomach twisted. Was he smiling because he remembered the seat incident, or because he found it amusing that she was now applying to his company? The interviewers exchanged polite glances, clearly aware of his presence. Silence fell over the room. Aisha tried to steady her shaking hands, but the CEO's eyes seemed to see right through her nerves. He spoke first, his voice calm but carrying authority. "You're the young woman from my flight, aren't you?" Aisha froze. She could feel her face flush red. Yes, sir," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded slowly, as if confirming something in his mind. "I remember you. You argued about the seat. You didn't apologize immediately, and yet, you had the courage to stand your ground." Her heart raced. She didn't know whether to feel proud or mortified. I didn't know it was your seat," she said softly. He raised an eyebrow, leaning back in his chair. "Of course you didn't. But most people would have panicked, or faked politeness. You didn't. You spoke honestly. That is rare." Aisha blinked. She wanted to protest, to downplay the moment, but she couldn't. There was something magnetic about the way he spoke, the way he looked at her. She realized this interview wasn't just about her resume anymore, it was about her character. The CEO turned slightly to the other interviewers. "Let's continue. I want to hear from her. Truly." Aisha took a deep breath, her voice steadier now. She answered questions honestly, sometimes hesitating, sometimes unsure, but always truthful. She didn't know if it impressed the CEO or infuriated him, but she spoke as herself. Minutes passed like hours. Every answer, every gesture, every small word seemed to matter far more than she could imagine. The CEO's eyes never left her, and Aisha could feel the weight of his gaze, but not in a threatening way. In a strange way, it was encouraging, almost as if he was rooting for her. At one point, a senior interviewer asked a difficult question about experience she didn't have. Aisha admitted it openly. "I don't have direct experience in that area, but I'm willing to learn and work hard." The CEO nodded approvingly. "Honesty over pretension," he murmured to himself. By the end of the interview, Aisha felt exhausted but also strangely confident. She had faced her fears, stood up to a powerful man, and spoken the truth without hiding anything. The CEO finally spoke. "You've surprised me. Most applicants would have been afraid, or tried to impress. You did neither. That tells me more about you than any resume could." Aisha's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know whether to expect a job offer or a scolding, but the words carried something she hadn't anticipated: respect. As she stood to leave, the CEO's calm but deliberate voice stopped her. "You didn't sit in my seat by accident. That moment told me more than you realize. I want to see how far you can go." Aisha's eyes widened. She didn't understand fully what he meant, but one thing was clear: her life was about to change, and this was only the beginning. As she stepped out of the office, the hallway felt different. She was no longer just a nervous girl, she was someone noticed, someone who had faced a powerful CEO and earned his attention, not through wealth, not through influence, but through honesty and courage. And somewhere deep inside, she realized that the story that began with a wrong seat on a plane was far from over. Aisha had started her new job, but walking into the office felt like stepping into another world. Glass walls, polished floors, and people in suits everywhere. It was nothing like her small-town life. She tried to focus on her tasks, but she couldn't shake the memory of the CEO's intense gaze during the interview. Her colleagues noticed her immediately. Whispers followed her down the hallway. "Did you see the new girl?" She argued with the CEO on the plane. "She's so bold, or crazy." Aisha's cheeks burned. She kept her head down and tried to ignore them, but she couldn't stop thinking about the man who had changed her life in a single moment. It wasn't long before she had to face him again, this time, in the office. The CEO walked past her desk, calm and confident, his presence commanding the room. He stopped briefly, leaning against the doorway, and looked at her. "You're settling in well?" he asked, his tone smooth but questioning. Aisha straightened her posture, trying to sound confident. "Yes, sir. I'm learning quickly." He studied her silently for a moment, then nodded. "Good. But remember, honesty matters more than polish here. Don't ever try to impress me or anyone else. Be yourself." Aisha's heart skipped a beat. She had faced so many challenges before, but this was different. He wasn't asking her to change for him, yet his approval mattered more than she expected. Later that day, she was called into a meeting with a group of senior employees. They were discussing a big project, and Aisha's small-town experience seemed insignificant to them. "Have you done anything like this before?" one senior man sneered. Aisha felt a knot in her stomach, but met his eyes. "No, but I can learn. And I work hard." The room went silent. The CEO, who had been observing from the corner, smiled faintly. He could see her courage, her honesty, and he liked it. As the days passed, Aisha found herself working closely with him on several projects. She noticed small gestures, how he trusted her opinion when others doubted her, how he defended her when someone spoke rudely, and how he watched her with a quiet intensity that made her nervous yet curious. One afternoon, they were reviewing a presentation together. Aisha suggested a new idea, one that challenged the usual methods the company used. "This could work," she said, her voice steady. "It's different, but it might give better results." A senior manager laughed dismissively. "She's just a girl from a small town. What does she know about corporate strategy?" The CEO's eyes narrowed. He stood up, walked to the manager, and said firmly, "She knows more than you think. Listen to her." Aisha's heart pounded. She had never been defended like this before. She looked at him in surprise, and for a moment, they shared a silent understanding. He trusted her, even when others didn't. That evening, as the office emptied, Aisha stayed behind to finish some work. The CEO approached her desk quietly. "You handled today well," he said, his voice low and calm. "Most people would have been intimidated, but you stood your ground." Aisha felt a mix of pride and embarrassment. I just tried to do my best," she murmured. He leaned slightly closer, his gaze softening. "It's more than that. You showed courage, strength, honesty, qualities I rarely see in people around me." Her cheeks warmed. She didn't know what to say. Every word he spoke made her heart race. She wanted to retreat but felt rooted to the spot. The next day, rumors began spreading across the office. People whispered about the connection between the CEO and the new girl. Some were skeptical, some jealous. "Why is he giving her so much attention? She doesn't belong here." Aisha tried to ignore them, but their words stung. She had never experienced such judgment. That evening, the CEO's mother called him. She was aware of Aisha's presence in her son's life. "Be careful," she warned. "Love across class lines is dangerous. Make sure she is serious." The CEO listened quietly but smiled slightly. I trust her. She's different. I don't need anyone else's approval. Meanwhile, Aisha was unaware of the call. She only knew that each day at work brought new challenges, but also small victories. She was learning to navigate the corporate world, to trust herself, and to stand tall even when others doubted her. And in the quiet moments when the office was empty, she felt his eyes on her, watchful, protective, and strangely encouraging. Something was growing between them, unspoken but undeniable. What had started as a wrong seat on a plane was turning into something much bigger, a story of courage, honesty, and a heart daring to love against all odds. The battle of heart versus power had begun, and Aisha had no idea just how high the stakes were. Days turned into weeks, and Aisha began to settle into her new life at the company. Yet, every day brought moments that made her heart race. Moments she could neither predict nor control. It started with small gestures. The CEO would occasionally leave a note on her desk, praising her ideas or offering subtle advice. Sometimes, he would linger a little longer in meetings, his dark eyes following her as if silently approving her every move. Aisha tried to focus on her work, but she couldn't help noticing the way he seemed to notice everything about her, her courage, her honesty, even her nervous habits. One late afternoon, they were assigned a project that required working together closely. The office was quiet, most employees having left for the day. Aisha sat across from him, spreading out papers and notes on the polished table. You work differently from most people here, he said suddenly, his tone casual yet serious. You think with your heart, not just your mind. Aisha blinked, unsure how to respond. I just try to do what feels right, she murmured. He leaned back in his chair, studying her closely. It's refreshing. Most people here are only focused on rules, profits, and appearances. You stand out. Her cheeks warmed. She looked down, trying not to meet his intense gaze, but she felt a strange thrill in the attention. She had never felt seen like this before, not for her looks, her charm, or her status, but simply for being herself. As the project progressed, they spent long hours together, sometimes talking about work, other times sharing small stories from their lives. Aisha learned about the pressures he faced as a CEO, the constant scrutiny, the loneliness of power, and the expectation that no one could ever challenge him. And he learned about her simple life, her struggles, her dreams, and the values she held close to her heart. One evening, while reviewing a report, Aisha accidentally spilled a cup of coffee on the papers. She gasped, trying to clean the mess, flustered and embarrassed. The CEO calmly reached out and stopped her. It's fine. Accidents happen, he said softly. But then, to her surprise, he smiled faintly. You know, that's why I like working with you. You don't pretend to be perfect. You don't hide your mistakes. You just face them. Aisha felt a strange warmth in her chest. No one had ever spoken to her like that. She realized that the nervous, simple girl she had once been was slowly being replaced by someone who believed in herself, even if only a little. But as their closeness grew, so did the tension around them. Other employees whispered behind their backs. Why is the CEO giving her so much attention? She doesn't belong here. She's too simple. Is this a romance? Or favoritism? Aisha tried to ignore the gossip, but it stung. She had never faced judgment like this before. Every glance, every whisper reminded her of the difference in their worlds. Then, one day, the CEO's mother arrived at the office unexpectedly. She was a woman of elegance and authority, and the air seemed to change when she entered. She spoke privately with her son, her voice low and firm. Be careful. Love across class lines can destroy people. Make sure she is serious before you go further. The CEO nodded but said nothing. Later, when Aisha noticed the brief meeting, she felt a pang of worry. Was she really ready for this? Could she survive the scrutiny, the gossip, and the high expectations of someone so powerful? Despite the doubts, small moments kept drawing them closer. Late-night work sessions, shared laughter over mistakes, subtle touches on the arm when guiding her through presentations, all of it created a bond neither could deny. One evening, as they left the office together, the city lights reflecting in the glass buildings, the CEO spoke softly. "Aisha, I trust you. I respect you. I've never met anyone like you." Her heart raced. She looked at him, unsure what to say. The words felt heavy, filled with meaning she could barely understand. And in that moment, she realized that this story, this journey that began with a wrong seat on a plane, was no longer just about her career. It was about something bigger, something fragile and precious. Something that could either grow into love or break under the pressure of two very different worlds. The evening air was cool, but inside, Aisha felt a warmth she couldn't explain. She knew that the connection between her and the CEO was deepening, and the stakes were only getting higher. What began with a small mistake had transformed into a complicated, beautiful dance of trust, courage, and the slow, delicate bloom of feelings that neither could ignore. And as they walked through the quiet streets, side by side, Aisha couldn't help but wonder, how far could this closeness go before the world forced them apart? The city lights blurred past the car window as Aisha sat silently, her mind racing. She had grown so much in the past few weeks. New job, new challenges, and a connection with the CEO that had slowly become impossible to ignore. Tonight, he had invited her on a flight, a private one, not a commercial plane. She wasn't sure why, but something in his calm, confident tone made her heart race. When she arrived at the small private airstrip, the sleek jet gleamed under the floodlights. The CEO stood beside it, waiting. His tailored suit seemed out of place next to the casual flight crew, yet his presence made everything else fade away. "You're ready?" he asked, his voice calm, but his eyes held an intensity that made her catch her breath. Aisha nodded, unsure whether she was ready for this flight, or for what it truly meant. As they boarded, she noticed that the cabin was quiet and intimate. No other passengers, no distractions. Just him, the plane, and the hum of engines preparing for takeoff. The flight began smoothly, the city shrinking beneath them. Aisha felt her nerves rise. This was different from her first flight, the one where everything had gone wrong. This time, she was with him intentionally, and the tension between them was palpable. He handed her a cup of water, and their fingers brushed lightly. Aisha felt her heart skip a beat. She looked up at him, and for the first time, she saw something more than the confident, controlled CEO. She saw a man who had chosen to notice her, to trust her, to care about her. The plane climbed higher, above the clouds, and the city lights vanished. The world below seemed distant and insignificant compared to the storm of feelings between them. Then, suddenly he spoke, his voice low but serious. "Aisha, do you trust me?" Her breath caught. She hesitated. I think I do," she whispered. He smiled, faint but warm, and reached out his hand. "Good. Because I want you to know, you are in the right place. Right here, right now, with me." Aisha looked at his hand, then into his eyes. She remembered the first flight, the wrong seat, the turbulence, the panic, the embarrassment. And now, everything had changed. She wasn't sitting in the wrong place anymore. She was here intentionally, at his side. The plane passed through a patch of clouds, and for a moment, turbulence shook the cabin. But this time, she didn't panic. She held onto his hand, steady, confident, trusting him completely. "You've changed so much," he said softly. "Not just here, in the company, but inside. You've shown courage, honesty, and a heart that refuses to lie. That's why I'm here. That's why I want you." Aisha felt tears prick at her eyes. She had never expected this, never imagined that a wrong seat on a plane could lead to this moment, to someone so powerful noticing her, respecting her, even loving her. As the plane leveled, he looked at her with a sincerity that made her heart race. "This isn't about wealth, status, or appearances. This is about honesty, trust, and heart. You have all three, and that's why you belong with me." Her hands trembled, but she didn't pull away. I never thought this could happen," she said softly. He smiled, his fingers gently brushing her cheek. "Neither did I. Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it?" Aisha nodded. The hum of the engines, the quiet cabin, and his steady presence made her feel a strange peace. She realized that what had begun with a small mistake, a wrong seat, a clumsy gesture, a flight full of fear, had led her here. The plane descended smoothly, and as the runway lights appeared, he whispered, "This flight isn't just about getting from one place to another. It's about destiny. Our destiny." Aisha looked at him, her heart full. Then, "I'm ready," she said. He held her hand firmly, and in that moment, above the clouds and city lights, they both knew that this was more than luck. It was more than chance. It was the start of a story neither could forget. A story that had begun with a wrong seat, a first flight, and a single moment of courage, and had grown into a love that would last a lifetime. As the jet touched down, Aisha felt a sense of belonging she had never known. She was no longer a girl who sat in the wrong seat. She was the girl who had claimed her place. Next to him, in his life, and in his heart. And that was only the beginning.